Hi there, everyone. Welcome to The Daily Gardener. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling. It's June 12th. Fragrance in the garden. The most fragrant blossoms include cheddar pinks, a member of the carnation family, fragrant lavender, peony, gardenia, honeysuckle, hyacinth, lilac, mock orange, Daphne, and bee balm. Here's today's brevities. On this day in 1805, Meriwether Lewis was just one day away from reaching the Great Falls of Missouri. He wrote his own brief description of a species that was previously unknown to science. He said, "The narrow-leafed cottonwood grows here in common with the other species of the same tree." Wonder if he saw all those cottonwood seeds floating through the air. And it was a little over 200 years ago, in 1817, that a forest ranger named Karl Freiherr von Drais invented the first bicycle. And it's the anniversary of the death day of Edward Newman, who was an English entomologist, botanist, and writer. Newman wrote an illustrated natural history of British moths in 1869, and he enjoyed writing poetry, just as the butterfly, child of an hour, flutters about in the light of the sun, wandering wayward from flower to flower, sipping the honey from all one by one. So does the fanciful verse I've created love mongst the experts in science to roam, drinking their spirit without being sated, bringing the sweets of their intellect home. And it was on this day in 1948 that the Michigan Botanical Club adopted its name. It wasn't agreed upon very easily. The board of directors and the executive committee couldn't agree. They decided to hold a vote. The choices included the Michigan Association for Native Plant Protection, the Michigan Wildflower Association, the Michigan Native Plant Society, and the Michigan Botanical Club. Although the rest of the state voted unanimously for the Michigan Botanical Club, the strong-willed Southeastern chapter had taken a poll, and they wanted the name the Michigan Wildflower Association. The matter was finally settled when the general membership voted, and it's been the Michigan Botanical Club ever since. And it was on this day in 1918 that the Dutch botanist Frank Nicholas Meyer was buried in Shanghai. 6 days later, his family back home in the Netherlands learned of his death. At the beginning of June, Meyer had traveled to Shanghai by way of Japanese riverboat on the Yangtze River. He was last seen leaving his cabin on the evening of June 1st. Then he simply disappeared. His body was found in the river 4 days later. Meyer was just 43 years old when he either fell overboard or was murdered. In either case, his legacy continues not only in the plants he introduced, like the Meyer lemon, but in the magnificent photographs that he took in China. In Unearthed Words, here are some short sayings about June. This one's from Bern Williams. If a June night could talk, it would probably boast it invented romance. Here's one from Al Bernstein. Spring being a tough act to follow, God created June. Here's one from Gertrude Jekyll from her book On Gardening. What is one to say about June? the time of perfect young summer, the fulfillment of the promise of the earlier months, and as yet no sign to remind one that its fresh young beauty will ever fade. Finally, here's this short and sweet one from Oscar Hammerstein in 1945. June is busting out all over. Today's book recommendation is Sex, Botany, and Empire, the story of Karl Linnaeus and Joseph Banks by Patricia Farah. Farah said, Banks provides a marvelous illustration of how science and the British Empire grew rich and powerful together. Today's garden chore is to get a big bag of perlite and add it to the soil in your containers. Seasoned gardeners swear by perlite. If you want soil to have good aeration, water retention, and drainage, try adding perlite. It's a naturally occurring mineral. It has a neutral pH level, so it won't change the soil in that way. It's incredibly porous, and it contains little pockets of space inside for air. It can also retain some amount of water while allowing excess to drain away. I get a huge bag of perlite every year from Amazon. I'll put a link to that in today's show notes. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. On this day in 2016, the Shady Acres Herb Farm closed in Chaska, Minnesota after 39 years. Shady Acres was the place to go for plants and herbs for almost 4 decades. Shady Acres was owned and operated by Teresa and Jim Meisler. In the mid-70s, Teresa had started out with the Minnesota Landscape Arboretum, and she'd been put in charge of the herb gardens. She recalled telling her boss, "I don't know what an herb is." 7 years later, Jim and Teresa started Shady Acres Herb Farm with seedlings grown in Dixie cups in their basement. Over time, they cultivated and sold over 600 varieties of culinary herbs and vegetables. Since the closing of their farm, Shady Acres has been moving in a different direction. They're now committed to teaching others about growing plants, and they do that in their monthly newsletter. And you can check out their website at shadyacres.com. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener, and remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. The Daily Gardener is produced weekdays in lovely Maple Grove, Minnesota. You can find complete show notes over at thedailygardener.org, and be sure to share the show with your garden friends. You can find The Daily Gardener on all your favorite social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest, and of course, Facebook. While you're over at Facebook, don't forget to join the Daily Gardener community. Just search for these 3 words, Daily Gardener Community. The group will pop right up, and then request to join. Finally, I want to thank my team at Podfly Productions, where my fabulous editor is Eric Begay. Have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you tomorrow.